Let's talk about what gets you out of bed in the morning. We're talking motivations. I'm going to start with what I consider some of the more negative motivations, and we'll meander ourselves towards more and more positive ones. This list isn't in perfect order, but that's the general theme of what we're going to do. I'm going to keep going back to this metaphor of fuel, as if each of these motivations is a fuel that you are burning in your engine to keep you going. Like all metaphors, not perfect. First up, spite. Spite is doing something because someone else doesn't want you to or doesn't think you can, and you're doing it mainly to show them, to prove them wrong. You're doing it in order to be better than them. Spite burns hot. It can push your vehicle over a lot of obstacles. The big problem with spite is it burns pretty dirty. This is a motivation that when you're using this to get yourself moving forward, it's gonna do some damage to you as well as get you to do things. A lot of people will try to tell you that spite isn't a good motivation, that you shouldn't be using this kind of thing to get you out of bed each day. And I'll kind of disagree with that. This shouldn't be the only motivation that you have, but sometimes a little bit of spite is going to get you over the hump and get that thing done that otherwise maybe you wouldn't do. Keep it in your toolbox. The other problem with spite, in addition to it burning pretty dirty, is you might outlive it. You might do something out of spite for a specific person, and then that person gets fired. And now where's your motivation coming from? So it's good to have, keep it in your toolbox, but know that when you're using this, this is damaging your engine. This is something to use for short little bursts of motivation, not as your background fuel that's keeping you going day after day after day. Look, I believe in spite as one of your potential motivations strongly enough that I made a shirt. If you're interested in picking that up, there should be a tag in this video as well as a link down below. Picking up some merch for this channel definitely helps me out and keeps the channel going, but ignore it as you will. Guilt, this is doing something because you feel that you have to, you feel that you are obligated for something, maybe because you're making up for something that you've done in the past, maybe because you feel that it's your responsibility for some reason that you feel bad about. This is pretty situational. If you're setting yourself up to be guilty about everything, that's not good. So it's going to be something that comes up kind of out of your control based upon situations occurring that you feel that is your responsibility to help resolve or to get out the other side. This is certainly one that's been on my playlist a little bit more than it probably should be. One of the major problems with guilt as a motivator is if you're someone that is often motivated by guilt, it's pretty easy to get manipulated into doing things. If someone can make you be guilty about something that you have no responsibility over, they can get you to do stuff that otherwise you wouldn't want to do. Some people are going to be heavily motivated by guilt. Fair enough, certainly true of me, but be aware that this is something that bad actors can come in and tweak and manipulate and use against you. So what's my advice on guilt? Like spite, I think it is good to acknowledge that this is a tool in your toolbox. Some of us can get ourselves moving by making ourselves guilty artificially. I wouldn't say that that's very healthy, but sometimes you just need to get yourself out of bed. If you are using it as a motivator on purpose, know that other people, maybe people with a little bit more observational skills than you have, are going to notice and they might take advantage of you. I'm not going to tell you not to use it, but know that if you're using it, especially on purpose, there's a good chance someone's going to take advantage. Fear is doing something because you are scared of the alternative. So you are finishing this task because to not finish this task means the project is going to fail. Or you are going to work every day because to not to means you're going to be starving out on the street. Like the previous two motivators, this isn't a great positive motivator. This is adding a lot of stress to your life. It'll get you out of bed. Fear doesn't really live where a lot of creativity lives. So if you're operating in this constant state of very high stress and fear about the consequences of everything you do, it can be difficult to do more creative things because you're afraid to step out of your comfort zone. If you're in a high state of fear, you're going to tend to tread the paths you've tread before. So if you need to be creative, if you need to think outside the box, fear may not be the way to go. It's gonna get you going, but it's gonna get you going in ways that you trust. Now, sometimes all you've got is fear. Deadline's coming, and to not hit that deadline has dire consequence. Or you're out of money. Or there is just a big, dangerous thing looming in the near future. In those cases, I wouldn't try to suppress fear as a motivator because that's going to result in you losing that source of motivation, and it's not going to really make you feel any better. Because at least subconsciously, your brain's going to know that there's something to be afraid of. By not acknowledging it, you're not able to use it to get things going. So when things are scary, acknowledge that they're scary and take the boost that you're going to get. Still in the slightly negative side is rewards. This is doing something because you're getting paid to do it, or doing something because of the other external reward that you're getting. So this isn't about the actual task. This isn't about the actual job. This is about the things that are attached and stapled onto the task or job. Lots of research on this. Rewards will keep you going because you'll keep showing up to work for the paycheck. You'll keep going because there's a check coming in the mail every month. It doesn't really do much else. It's not hot fuel. It's much more of a very cool fuel, keeps the engine going, keeps you showing up, but not much else. And what the research has actually shown is in some cases, once you've crossed into I am being rewarded adequately, additional rewards can actually undermine your motivation. What can happen is something that's intrinsic, meaning you are deciding to do this for your own internal reasons, can turn into an extrinsic motivation because you're doing this for a paycheck. And the problem with that is now it's got a number value on it. It's problematic in a bunch of reasons. Now, most of us do our job, at least in part, for the paycheck. So it's always there a little bit in the background, kind of keeping the engine revving, keeping it at a base level, RPMs, keeping you going. So it's not terrible. It's just not going to get you over the hump. It's not going to get you to smash through that wall. It's not going to get you to come up with the creative solution. It's going to keep you going, but not much more than that. Similarly, in that sort of neutral background motivation is routine. Routine keeps the wheels spinning. Sometimes the job you need to do isn't creative. It isn't hard. It's just mundane and you just need to keep going. And having a routine that you do every day just keeps things happening. You wake up in the morning and you get in your car and you drive to work and you make yourself a coffee and you sit down and you at your desk and you check your email and then you do your day of work and then you do that day after day. It keeps things going. I think routine is often dismissed as a motivator, but it's incredibly powerful to keep the engine moving. Obviously, routine isn't bringing any creativity to the party. It's not revving your engine at anything other than its very base level. By definition, it is about consistency. It burns really cool. It doesn't have a lot of power there, but it keeps you going. One of the things that I worry about as we've moved from an in-the-office world into a remote work world is that a lot of people have lost routine. And so that base level motivation that got them working every day is gone or weaker or not quite as established as it was in a work from office world. I suspect that we will over time figure out routine that will get people back into something that keeps them going. Don't dismiss routine as a useful motivator. Some days, that's all you need. You just need to get out of bed. And the reason you got out of bed was because that's what you do. You get out of bed and have a shower and get dressed and start your day just by starting your day the same way every day. It's not sexy, it's not amazing, but it gets you going. And sometimes that's all you need is just to get going. Competition is like the positive version of spite. So where spite, you're doing something to show someone that they're wrong or to prove yourself better than them. Competition is about being better than someone else, but in a way that it's self-reinforcing. You see this a lot in sports where two people, like you see this in golf, where two strong golfers golfing together, both of them will have better games. Because what they're doing is they're competing against each other and they're actually making everyone better. You're still attached to a single comparator. It's still based on these externalities that you don't have full control over, but it doesn't have as much negative baggage as spite, where you're doing it from a place of anger. Here you're doing it from a place of betterment, ideally. Is competition just spite in a ski mask? Arguably, yes. But I think there are ways to frame it where it is better as a motivator than spite is. That said, it's pretty easy for competition to turn into spite, especially if there's a difference in power dynamics. If two teams are competing with each other and they're both about the same success and the same size and they have about the same resources, then that can probably be framed as competition. But as that power dynamic shifts around and one team is more successful or larger or has access to more resources, then it's really easy for that motivator to mutate and degrade into something that looks a lot more like spite than it looks like competition. On both sides, honestly, because the stronger, more successful team starts looking down on the other team, and the underdog team starts thinking of themselves as hard done by and starts looking for opportunities to show that they're actually the better team. I think there can be healthy motivation inside of competition, but it's very easy for it to slip into spite if you're not careful. Accomplishment is the feeling of finishing. It's good for little bursts. I'm going to triage 200 bugs. I did it. I feel the benefit of doing that. It is good for short little bursts where you can actually accomplish something, where you can actually finish something. Sometimes the reality is you're in for a long haul and you're not going to get that sense of completion easily, at least not without manufacturing some form of artificial finish line along the way. This is also something where it is very easy to lose that sense of accomplishment. Because if you aim for 200 bugs triaged, and for whatever reason you only manage to do 190 bugs, then you have actually failed that accomplishment. And you run the risk of undermining that motivator going forward, because you may not be willing to take another run at it because last time you failed. The other problem with accomplishment is that you can get into this feedback loop where what you need to feel the sense of accomplishment gets bigger and bigger. Where before you needed to do 50 of something, now you need to do 60, 70, 80, 200. And it keeps escalating until eventually you get beyond your reach and fail. This one is good if it's used as a boost, as nitrous, just to kind of get you over the finish line, but it's not going to be something that you can use or sustain long term. I talk a lot about completion urgency, which is the motivation of a team to complete things, to bring things to a state of being done. That's a great source of accomplishment, is getting things done. What can happen is if you have a leadership team that isn't willing to put a pin into things, isn't willing to call things done, isn't willing to celebrate something as being good enough, then you actually can turn this motivation into a demotivation. If I finish something and I get that sense of accomplishment, and then someone more senior than me comes along and tells me that, no, in fact, you aren't done. Here's a giant list of things that needs to change, and that keeps happening to me, then I stop trying to get that sense of accomplishment, because the feeling of it being opened back up again is actually worse than the good feeling I got for checking it off. So I start to avoid that, and you can turn your team into a team that avoids finishing things because you've basically told them that they're not allowed. Anytime they think they're done, you're just going to tell them that they're not. And that can be a really bad place to have a team be. If they don't feel like they can ever finish anything, probably because the leadership showed them that, then it's going to be really hard for them to finish things. And what you've done is you've turned what can be a great and powerful motivator, which is the positive feeling of completing something, and turned it into a source of demotivation because they're actually actively avoiding completing things because the feeling of completing things is actually bad because they know someone's going to come along and tell them to change everything. Sometimes things got to change, sure, but most of the time, you need to celebrate people's accomplishment, celebrate people's completion, and help them feed upon that and get things done. Even if it's not the way you would do it, let done be done and move on, and let the team build itself into an engine that loves completing things and can find its own points of completion along the way. If you've lost it, if you've damaged it, if you've destroyed it, you can start to rebuild it potentially by introducing states of completion along the way. I'm not a huge fan. I think done is done to a large degree, and everything else is kind of fake. But if the team has lost its love affair with getting things done because you've basically told them they're never done, give them a couple of stops along the way that feel like done and start to rebuild that habit in the team. Team is actually a pretty strong motivator. You are doing things because of the team. You're doing your job to help the people around you because they are people that you like or people that you want to see succeed. So teamwork makes the dream work. You have a group of people around you that you want to commit to and help support. You do run the risk of undermining this motivator if your team changes. Maybe it changes because someone leaves the team voluntarily. Maybe it changes because someone leaves the team involuntarily. And that might be even worse because someone gets let go and you end up losing this as a motivator because maybe you don't like the team that's left. Or maybe now what you're forced to do is you were being motivated by a close-knit team around you, but because of changes in the structure of the project or the makeup of the team, you're forced to look at a much larger team. Maybe you don't like that team. So this can turn into a demotivator quite quickly if the team changes sufficiently, if the situation is modified in a way where you're not feeling that attachment or close-knit nature of the team. Now, leadership can help with this one because it is their responsibility to help people see the entire project as their team, at least to some degree, so that as people move around within the project, they can feel a certain degree of team cohesion with people that they may not have worked with before, but they still feel that they believe in similar things and they have similar goals when it comes to the project. If leadership fails to do that, then what you're likely to have is a bunch of little cliques that are calling themselves an overall team, but are actually a whole bunch of little teams that are motivated within themselves, but may not be able to work cross-team very effectively. A couple of dark patterns when it comes to team as a motivator. This has almost become a meme, which is the "here we're family" attempt to try to make the team be such a strong motivator that you will do anything same as you would do with your family. I don't think that is a path that really is successful. I think most people see through the "here we're more like a family" and see it as actually more of a red flag than an actual thing that makes them believe and commit to the team more than they normally would. But it's something you do see related to this motivation. Something that does work, but is potentially quite destructive, is it's scapegoating. You can make a group of people come together quite strongly as a team, as a group, and be motivated to work really hard if you can give them a really clear group that they are working against. I guess in a way, what you're doing is you're almost building team level spite as a motivation. We should work extra hard because corporate is trying to screw us and we need to show them that we can't be stopped. This works. I'm just going to tell you right now, this works. You can, by scapegoating another group, you can get a team to come together and be motivated to try to do a lot of extra work. But be super careful here, because a lot of things can happen as that scapegoat shifts. What happens when you need them to work with that group that you scapegoated in 2 months' time, and you've basically told them to hate that group? Or what happens if that group goes away and stops being available as a motivator? Or what happens if someone interacts with that group and finds out they're not as evil as you are implying that they are? I guess this is sort of the dangerous cheat. Scapegoating can work. It does work, but it can blow up in your face if you're not careful. And once it does, you can really damage the trust you have with your team, because you've basically lied to them or othered some other group in order to get things going. So I guess break glass in case of emergency only on this little bit here. I didn't originally have duty on my list. This says something more about me than it does about it as a motivator. I kind of had duty lumped in my mind under guilt, which isn't great. I don't think it has to be necessarily driven by a sense of guilt. They are related to each other. If you feel like the project you're working on, the people you're working with, the tasks you have are worthy of your effort, that they deserve your loyalty, then you're willing to put in extra effort. You're willing to do a lot of extra things to get things done. Now, what happens when the people that you were being loyal to do something that undermines that loyalty? Do you lose that sense of duty? Do you feel betrayed and your motivation is gone? If the project, if the leadership, if your teammates feel worthy to you, then this is an incredibly powerful motivator, because you're willing to do almost anything to help them succeed, to do what needs to be done. But if that loyalty is ever lost for whatever reason, then this motivator can very quickly flip on its head and turn into something where you can't do what needs to be done anymore, because you can't imagine supporting this person or this project that you feel has betrayed you. Flow is an amazing motivator for people who've experienced it. This is getting in the zone and working because the work itself is just feeding on itself and you're just moving through it almost effortlessly. It's an amazing state to be in when you can get it. It's not always there. You can't always control when you're going to get it. And not all jobs are really well suited for flow states. When I was a programmer, I could get into flow fairly often. You would spend 8 hours working on a problem. The world basically fades away and you're just working. The motivator is just the work. You're just working on the work because the work is there and it's just drawing you through it. When I was working as an executive producer, your day is much more chopped up. It's very rare to find yourself in a situation, first of all, where you're working on something for longer periods of time. But secondly, also, the tasks that did take longer didn't always lend themselves to a flow state. Occasionally, working on pitch decks and things like that, there was a flow state. Nothing as strong as when I was working as a programmer. If you are leading people, please try to protect their opportunities for flow, because this one's kind of a freebie. If you let them get into the flow state, then they're working hard because of the work itself. And this costs you nothing other than fixing up your meetings and making sure people aren't constantly being interrupted. Novelty is working on something new. So why are you excited to go to work today? Well, today is when you're going to get to start that new task. You're going to get to crack open the animation system that you've been waiting to take a look at all this time. It's a great motivator. it isn't always available. In fact, it can be very dangerous to be chasing novelty when you're trying to finish a project. People who are motivated strongly by novelty often have a lot of difficulty finishing things. I have worked with such people where they will get something to 60 or 70% done. They've knocked off all of the new bits, all of the shiny bits that they haven't experienced before. Now they don't want to work on it anymore because the novelty is gone. This is something that you want because you can't make great creative things if you don't have some interest in making new things. But there are times in your project when novelty is an incredibly dangerous motivator because it can actually cause you to work against finishing things and can cause you to undermine the completion of whatever it is you're trying to do. Great to get you started, not so great to get you finished. What I'm calling fulfillment might actually be two motivators. So there's the motivator of being in love with this specific atomic level things that you do. So I love drawing and my job is drawing, so I am motivated to draw because I just love the act of putting pen to paper. The other part of fulfillment is that you love the thing that comes out the other side. A bit more esoteric here. I've gone to cons and had people come up to me and tell me how the games that I've worked on helped make their life better, or change their lives, or help them understand more about themselves. And that's also a source of fulfillment. You are getting engaged because you believe that what you're working on is going to help make people's lives better. You are motivated to pursue that. The first thing, that atomic level thing, is great in the moment because I love drawing, so I'm going to draw. But it's very unlikely that your job only includes tasks that you love doing. So it can be a little lumpy because sometimes you just gotta do stuff that needs to be done and maybe you're not super excited to do it. Or it can actually be worse than that, and it can actually cause you to hyper fixate on the parts of the job that you love, and the parts that still need to happen maybe fall away and don't get the attention that they also need to get. The second one, the one where you're more chasing the output, isn't entirely up to you necessarily. You might be able to trick yourself into getting it by pointing to the past, to the sense of fulfillment you've gotten through the things that you've done in the past and chasing getting that again. It's very related to accomplishment, but maybe with a little bit more positivity attached with the product, as opposed to just the satisfaction of the checkbox. You're more chasing the emotion that you might be injecting into the world, if that makes sense. There's not really a lot of downside with either of these motivators. The only thing I would say is don't neglect the things that don't give you this level of fulfillment if that's to the detriment of the job that you're doing. And then finally, belief. If you wish to build a ship, do not divide the men into teams and send them into the forest to cut wood. Instead, teach them to long for the vast and endless sea. If you are so strongly committed to the cause or to the output or to the product that you are building, then you are willing to do almost anything to see that come to fruition. I think that guilt and duty and belief are very tightly coupled. And let me see if I can tease them apart and explain why belief, I think, is super positive, whereas guilt is a much more negative motivator. With guilt, I am doing something because I feel it is my fault, or it is my responsibility, or I am the only person that can prevent something bad from happening or to undo a harm that has occurred. In the case of duty, I believe in the group or potentially the end goal. I may not understand how what I am doing right now is helping that cause, but I am doing it because I believe in the overall group. With belief, I believe in that end goal. I believe in what we are trying to accomplish. but I also understand how what I am doing right now is helping that cause, is helping get us to that end goal. So here's an example. I'm digging a latrine. If my motivator is guilt, maybe I'm digging that latrine because I damaged the old latrine and I feel like I'm responsible for fixing it. If I'm digging that latrine out of a sense of duty, I'm doing it because I believe in the organization that I'm part of, and I'm doing it because I was told to, and I'm willing to do some things that I don't really understand because I was told to. If I am digging that latrine out of a sense of belief, I'm digging that latrine because doing so is going to save a village from the ravages of cholera. And I have a direct line from what I am doing to the end goal or the larger cause that I see. If you can build this yourself, that's awesome. But sometimes this requires a really powerful, really exceptional leader who can help you see that what you're doing matters to the greater cause. Part of this is making the goal feel worth it. But part of it is also making you understand how what you're doing matters. This is probably the most positive one on the list, because if everything lines up, everything you do is bringing you closer to that goal. It can be corrupted. You can be aimed at things that maybe you shouldn't be aimed at. You can be taken advantage of. And when that comes to light, then this motivation falls apart. But if you can believe in where you're going, it can be incredibly powerful to help you want to continue to step towards that goal. Maybe it's obvious, but I'll just state it here at the end. I think that it's useful to have all of these motivators in your toolbox because there's different points in time when they're what you're going to need. Sometimes you just need something to get you out of bed and get you to do your work for the day. And that's when rewards or routine can keep you going. But then hopefully something else, something better will come along and get you into a higher RPM, going back to that engine metaphor. Something like novelty or accomplishment or, if needed, fear. Don't run on just one motivation. None of these motivations are enough to get you through every single day. Or the ones that are, like things like duty, are easily destroyed, and then it's your only motivator. You have nothing else left to get you through the day. So build a basket of motivators so that you have something to fall back on. Things like routine, things like the rewards, so that when everything else is kind of missing, you're able to keep going as best you can until something else, something better, something with a little bit more octane in it comes along to get you revved back up again. There have certainly been times in my career where for months, all I was doing was working for the money, for the check that came in the mail. But then by the time a year went by, I moved on to something else and I wasn't falling back on that baseline motivator as much to keep things going. All of these motivators are worth having in your basket, even the ones that people consider negative, things like spite, things like fear, things like guilt. But don't rely on any of them too much, or you run the risk of finding yourself without anything in the basket. A special thanks to my members. They provide the resources that this channel needs to keep running. If you're interested in becoming a member, there's a link to that down in the description. As I mentioned earlier, we have merch. If you're interested in picking something up, this video should be tagged, and there should also be a shelf below this video that will point you to the store. That also helps the channel out. Did I miss anything? What are some motivators that keep you going? What are some of the downsides to some of these motivators that I mentioned that maybe I forgot? Let me know these things down in the comments. I will see you again soon. Thank you.